Thank you. For more than 3/4 of a century, the OPC has celebrated and defended the best in international journalism. In recent years, we have expanded that mission to include helping to prepare journalists and journalism students for the demands of covering our world. We have raised our voice against mounting media oppression in countries like China, Russia, and Turkey. This work is more vital than ever, even as it is more dangerous, and yet you do it every day. You confront slaveholders and corporations that abandon their own ideals. You confront governments, and you confront terrorists in the field, and sometimes even in our offices, and even in the case of Bangladeshi journalist and LGBT activist Julas Manin, in our very homes. To help us work in this dangerous landscape, the OPC was one of the first signatories to the principles to protect journalists assigned to dangerous reporting abroad. In carrying out our mission and adopting it for these times, we continue a proud tradition, a tradition embodied by giants of our profession who dared to challenge the world to be better. David Fanning is one of those giants. David was a pioneering catalyst in news documentary in the 1970s, and for the next 4 decades, he showed the world the power of international journalism when backed by passion, intelligence, and a fearless dedication to get at the truth. All along the way, among his many honors, he earned 8 Emmys, and in 2013 received a Lifetime Achievement Emmy in honor of his work. And yet, his successor as executive producer of Frontline, Rainey Aronson, and her team may constitute an even greater legacy. Watch how many awards they will take home tonight. Now, a little about Frontline.
All I want is the truth. Just give me some truth. I've had enough of winning things by neurotic psychotic head politicians. All I want is the truth. Just give me some truth.
There really isn't anywhere else in journalism that does what we do. The issues that we began to wrestle with in the first season of Frontline are as vivid today as they were then.
Because 2 guns were kept in a bedroom drawer, ready and waiting, my granddaughter will be without a mother.
My daughter survived, but not before witnessing her friends and her teacher slaughtered in front of her.
We will always have miscarriages of justice. We will always have people in high places who abuse their power, and reckless policies in far-off places.
Everybody knew what was happening in Rwanda.
It made no difference what you said or how you said it. The world just didn't care.
Frontline represents the idea that we can take a path through this forest of information and draw a bright line through it and make sense of the world.
If there is a God, what is happening?
Frontline raised questions about the decision to go to war in Iraq within months of 9/11.
There are people in the State Department that refer to what is going on in the Pentagon as the cabal that is absolutely determined to lay the groundwork to get Saddam out with the use of American military troops.
We followed the troops into Baghdad. We stayed with the story through difficult times.
Garcia! He went out fighting, and he died like he should.
The best of Frontline, you come into the beginning of a story thinking you know something, and you come out the other end being surprised by what you found.
You just made it up?
Just telling them what they wanted to hear.
The stories of people. And people you care about. And people you love to hate.
What do you have to say to the public, to your investors?
So is this easy money that you're making with Madoff?
Easy. Easy peasy.
Our job at Frontline is to take this very special idea of literate narrative journalism and to publish it in as many places as possible, out to people through social media, to create connections to people who care about these ideas and who also care about Frontline and about public broadcasting, and to publish all the supporting materials and the extended interviews in a way that makes our journalism transparent. That is as close to the mission of public broadcasting as I can imagine.
All I want is the truth now. Just give me some truth now.
This idea, this commitment, this mission is valuable to us as a country and to us as citizens. Television that is important for the future as much as it is for the present.
All I want is the truth now. Just give me some truth now. All I want is the truth. Just give me some truth now. All I want is the truth. Just give me some truth now.
David?
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you so much.
Actually, can I see that?
Thank you.
In recognition of pioneering and peerless work in international broadcast journalism, for 5 decades of setting the bar for dynamic and exclusive investigative reporting as the leader of World and then Frontline, for his role in mentoring generations of journalists and filmmakers, for his fearless determination to speak truth to power, and for his restless dedication to confront and undermine injustice, I present the President's Award of the Overseas Press Club of America to David Edward Fanning.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Goodness me. What an extraordinary honor. Over the years, I've been to many of these gatherings and always been in awe of the courageous and terribly smart people who are honored here. I certainly never imagined I would join them. I'm humbled. Thank you, Marcus, all of the Overseas Press Club, for honoring Frontline in my name. This means all the more to me because so much of my professional life has been defined by trying to understand our place and my own in the world. Growing up in the 1950s and 60s in South Africa in a small provincial town with no television, the government in its wisdom decided it was just too dangerous a medium and so banned it until 1976, well after I left the country. We lay on the hot cement next to the public swimming pool, tuning into the shortwave crackles of Radio Lorenzo Marques in Portuguese East Africa, now Mozambique, desperate to catch an echo of a world beyond our town, and mostly to hear the thrilling sounds of Elvis Presley and Jailhouse Rock, banned on the local radio. I was blessed, though, that my mother made her twice-weekly trip to the library and returned with books which piled up on the table next to her chair, and I read late at night. They were mostly nonfiction, biographies, and travel. Peter Fleming, Patrick Leigh Fermor, Wilfred Thesiger. They fed my curiosity and inspired me to make my own journey in time to teach myself to report and even make some films about my own country and later others. I am in a way an accidental journalist. There was no school of journalism, but I discovered the intense gathering of my university newspaper and ended up as the editor, as much because it put me in the midst of the excitement of student politics in 1968, but also because the stakes were so high there. The government banned some of my friends. We occupied the administration building. We began to connect to a world beyond ourselves. I still had no idea what a television documentary looked like when I accompanied a friend, a cultural anthropologist working on his thesis into Soweto, the vast township outside of Johannesburg, with a borrowed camera and two 400-foot rolls of 16mm film. It was terra incognita then for white South Africans who were not the police, so the privilege of entering that world was extraordinary. And I remember when we shot those first few frames, the congregation of an African independent church, a tiny group of just 18 people, all members of the minister's family. They were called the Bantu Bethlehem Christian Catholic Church in Zion of South Africa, all around the world. Just 18 of them, all members. They brought together that Sunday to escape the horrors of the apartheid world outside. Backlit by the morning sun, in white robes, singing as they entered a little pond for baptism. I turned on the camera, and every frame of that roll of film I'd bought, matted, sixpence, sixpence, sixpence. I heard it roll past. It was precious. The image, the place, the purpose. Years later, I was living on a beach in California when I got a call from a man called Peter McGee, who was at WGBH in Boston, the public television station that seemed as unattainable as Harvard. I knew someone who'd impressed me because he'd had an interview for a job at Nova. Anyway, Peter had seen a film that I'd made about the civil war in Angola in 1975, a small film, an explainer, made for no money, cobbled together with bought news footage, Washington interviews, and a map on the studio floor. He saw enough in it to suggest we meet on a forthcoming trip in Los Angeles. He told me about a series he was developing called Simply World. I'd left South Africa with my second film, sold it to the BBC, and in 1972 made my way to California, where I walked into a little public television station and hung about long enough, volunteering, until they gave me a job as a cinematographer editor. I began to teach myself. I made a half dozen films around California, and one called Deep South, Deep North, 20 years after the Brown decision, in Detroit and Alabama, exploring images so reminiscent of South Africa. I flew with Rosa Parks from Detroit to Montgomery, and she rode a bus for me. There is a wonder to this business, a privilege, the license granted to be curious, and with it, an obligation to the purpose. So I was excited to make films for Peter's proposed new series World, Jamaica, Lebanon, Northern Ireland, where I'd done a spell for BBC News. But no, he was looking for someone called an executive producer. That was the guy at the station who put his name at the end of my film. I said no. Thanks, no. A day later, I woke up and wrote him a passionate letter about all the ideas he should be thinking about, and Peter invited me to come to Boston. There I encountered an extraordinary institution that was WGBH. It was a place of ideas where teams of producers asked hard questions in a program called The Advocates, where Peter had produced a series called Arabs and Israelis, the production team half Jewish and half Palestinian, and who joined together to edit in Geneva. WGBH was where I really began my education as a journalist and to understand the dialogue between fairness and hard evidence. I also became an executive producer. World was described as a series about the world as others see it. And that first year, we gathered films from all over, traveled to meet foreign broadcasters, and found the filmmakers and the producers. The first film of the series was called The Clouded Window, about how we see the world, a coup in Thailand, riots in Egypt, covered by different international newscasts with completely different political interpretations of the content. I persuaded dear Dan Shaw to anchor it and made a wonderful poster with his picture on it saying, "Warning, the news you watch tonight is not the truth." There are many truths, many ways to see the world, and you all know in this room how hard it is to keep your compass boxed, to navigate and find a path through the shoals. I was so privileged to work with some of the smartest people making films around the world and to be inside their edit rooms, to ask them how they got that, how they put those pieces together. So I found out what it takes to resist the easy edit, the quick manipulation, the dramatic emphasis, and I learned what to look for when it was just a little too neat. World ran for 5 years. Then in 1982, I was asked by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to add domestic reporting and bring World home, to create a new 26-week-long documentary series, and that's how Frontline was born. I tell you this long-winded and self-indulgent story to say that the ideas, the concerns, and the purpose that the Overseas Press Club represents is at the very heart of Frontline. I don't have to tell you what you already know, that if we want to understand who we are, we have to know where we live and how the rest of the world has to survive. The crackle of my boyhood shortwave has been replaced by the cacophony of the age of Facebook and Twitter. Undifferentiated, it seems there are no boundaries, no story unremarked. And yet I still long for the stories of journeys, the deep and fascinating narratives I found in those books on my mother's table that tried to make sense of those encounters with a far-off world. We still need them, and I hope that's what we've tried to do at Frontline. I want to thank all of the prize winners here, past and present, for the extraordinary work you've done. Let me just acknowledge some of the people that make Frontline great, a few who are here tonight. Rennie Aronson, for 15 years as a producer, a senior producer, and a deputy executive producer, absorbed the lessons of Frontline and is now so capably running the series as executive producer with his deeper commitment to those ideas. Almost half of the current season of foreign films. There's my longtime colleague, Martin Smith, who more than any single producer in the life of the series has dedicated himself to telling tough stories in hard places with grace and eloquence. Marcella Gaviria, who has as much courage as anyone we know, has given us her own producing passions. Ken Dornstein, who once asked me if this really is a career, helped me shape Frontline World, our spin-off series that ran for 10 years. He's now revealed himself as a talented director whose film, My Brother's Bomber, is as good as it gets. Najibullah Qureshi continues to amaze us with his extraordinary bravery and enterprise in Afghanistan. Jamie Doran, the pirate captain who goes to places we often don't want to know about, and besides he wouldn't tell us anyway. Evan Williams, who brings such journalistic rigor and toughness in the most difficult places. Andrew Metz is the tough editor we all need. And my wife, Renata Simone, who has always been so my inspiration, my intellectual companion, and tough but fair critic. She's a talented filmmaker in her own right, whose epic series, The Age of AIDS, was one of Frontline's great contributions to understanding. I return her love and support in equal measure. Thank you. Thank you again for this honor. And in case you're wondering what I'm doing now, I just got back from Pakistan. I leave on Sunday for Norway, and then a few weeks later to Lebanon. I'm trying to get back to where once upon a time I left off. Thank you. so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Everyone, as soon as your tables are cleared, we will continue with the evening. Thank you all very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's showtime. Let's see if the left side of the room can do better this time. Right side of the room, left side of the room. Who's going to win? Ladies and gentlemen, if we take our seats, we'll get on with the rest of the program. Thank you very much. Boy, it'd be cool to have a little. Right? Ladies and gentlemen, if we could, please. Thank you very much. No, seriously, the right side of the room had you guys beat like 9 ways from Sunday. And then this middle table here, I don't know what that is. Ladies and gentlemen, if we could, please, thank you very much. It is time for the rest of this evening's program. There are winners in the room, I know, who are eager for this to get going. And we will as soon as everybody can grab a seat. Thank you very much. Left side of the room, nice job. Good job. All right, so a couple of quick housekeeping things before we get on with the presentation of the awards and certificates this evening. For each award, I will announce the names of the honorable mention citation winners, then followed by the names of the award winners. Hold your applause, if you would, until I've read both groups. And this is what it says here. This isn't my rule. Only the award winners get to come up on the stage, okay? Just so we all know. We will begin with newspapers. If we are ready, are we ready? Yes? All right, we're going to begin with newspapers. It's the Hal Boyle Award, sponsored by Norm Pearlstein in honor of his friend Jerry Flint. It is for the best newspaper news service or online reporting from abroad. If we could all just keep it down for a moment. There are people who have worked hard on these submissions, and the winners deserve to be heard. Thank you. Again, the Hal Boyle Award for best newspaper news service or online reporting from abroad. The citation goes to Patrick McDonald, Christopher Goffard, Laura King, Kate Linthicum, and Henry Chu of the Los Angeles Times for fleeing Syria. The award goes to Martha Mendoza, Margie Robinson, Robin McDowell, and Esther Toussaint of the Associated Press. Their series, well-deserved applause. Their series was called Seafood from Slaves. It was so powerful that it has won 2 OPC awards this evening. In addition to Hal Boyle, the team won the Malcolm Forbes Award, sponsored by Forbes magazine, for best international news reporting in newspapers, news services, or online. To say nothing, by the way, of a Pulitzer and a Polk, so there's that as well. The team of AP reporters exposed an ugly truth behind much of the inexpensive seafood on our tables. It is produced by people held captive in Thailand's food industry. And as a result of this piece of overseas journalism, more than 2,000 people held in slavery have been freed. Accepting the award is Ramana McDowell and Mary Raj Kumar. She is an OPC governor. She edited the series. Congratulations. 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 Please.
First, we wanted to say a very big thank you to the Overseas Press Club. It's a wonderful organization, and we're honored and humbled to be here. We also wanted to say a very big thank you to the Associated Press for supporting us. We know this is difficult, expensive work, and it really means a lot to have the organization behind us. When we started this project, seafood and slavery were an open secret in Southeast Asia. People knew there was slavery in the seafood industry. It was called an old story. So 2 of our reporters, Robin McDowell and Margie Mason, wondered, what would it take to make people care? And the answer soon became obvious. It would take linking it to their dinner tables, to what they were eating, so that people couldn't say, this is a horrible thing happening in some country far away, but so that they could see that it was really coming into their homes and into their lives. So that's what started the project. It took months of source work, months of asking around, months of digging, and it finally led the reporters to the island of Benjina. And Robin is going to describe what that was like.
All right. It took, even from Jakarta, 24 hours to get to Benjina, a tiny remote island between Papua New Guinea and Australia. So the first few days actually were a little bit frustrating because There's a village called Benjina, and about 100 meters away, the factory grounds, where we could see trawlers pulling up. We could see a factory, but we didn't really have access to the men. A few would come across the channel now and then to buy cigarettes, visit the prostitutes, to get something to eat, but really we had very little access to them. And on top of that, I do not speak Burmese. I speak some Indonesian, so I was able to find some people who could tell me a little bit, because as it turned out, some of them had been stuck there for 5 years, 10 years, some even 2 decades. So there was a limited amount I could get. After 2 days or 3 days, I called our Burmese colleague, Esther Tucson from Myanmar, and said, we need you here. There is a story here. We've gotten some of it, but we have just scratched the surface. You need to see what's going on. She showed up. That was another 30 hours. And she arrived, and the doors just swung open. People could not wait to talk to her. They chased her down the streets. They wanted to be interviewed. They wanted their stories to be told. When we slept at night, they'd knock on our doors saying, Burma, Burma, trying to get it to wake us up, throwing rocks at our windows. We were staying in a little villager's home. They would call off the sides of the trawlers when we pulled up, trying to pass messages saying, our families, please tell our families they're alive. One man gave us the only picture he had of his mother. He hadn't seen her for 10 years, saying, please find her in the village. Please tell her that I'm okay. This is evidence that I'm okay. So at that point, it wasn't just about making the link to the American dinner table and getting the Americans outraged. We wanted to help find a way to make the story so powerful that these men would be rescued. And eventually, that is what's happened. We were able to follow the reefer ship after seeing them load the slave-caught fish onto that boat to Thailand. It was we followed it by satellite. It took 15 days. We waited there and met those boats in trucks and followed them as they fanned out across the tiny port town. I shouldn't say tiny, it's a big port town of Samut Sakhon in Thailand, down small alleyways to cold storage facilities, tiny processing plants, many places that did not have names. And over the next few weeks, we were able to find out whom they were supplying to, which big exporting companies, including 2 of the world's biggest exporting companies. And our colleague, Martha Mendoza, used custom bills of record to link them to Walmart, Cisco, Red Lobster, pet food companies like Fancy Feast, pretty much everybody that, I would say 20 big companies. So from there,
we had 2 things that we had to face. One was we couldn't write about this while the men were still there. And that was paramount. We knew their lives were in danger. We knew that we could not show their faces. We could not name names. So in the end, the International Organization for Migration got them out, just the few men that we were going to mention in our story. So that was an interesting operation. They got the wrong men at first, then both the wrong men and the right men went out together. But that worked. And then the next thing we had to do, once we had the company links, was of course to confront the companies. So we were nervous, and our lawyers were very nervous. I mean, Walmart, Cisco, these are not small names. And then to our shock, what we found with company after company, nobody denied it. We thought they would categorically deny, no, this couldn't possibly happen. Nobody, not one of the companies denied it. And we realized that's because they know. They know that their supply chains are muddy, and they know that this could be happening. So that was a real revelation for us. I don't think we expected that. So the work had in many ways more impact than we could have possibly hoped. It did free 2,000 men. Laws were passed, the company was shut down, but I think we still feel that there's a lot that we still need to do. And
I think the clock has run out, but I'll just add that we were following one company and we were trying to prove that this one company was doing something wrong, but the bigger goal was to show how dirty the entire industry was and how many possibilities there are for abuse in the seafood industry in general, not just in Thailand, but pretty much all over the world. So I think there's a lot of work still to be done on that.
So to spare me having to do this all night, if you come up here, go off that way. All right. Number 2 this evening, the Bob Considine Award, sponsored by Bill Holstein and Rita Seville, is for Best Newspaper, News Service, or Online Interpretation of International Affairs. The citation goes to the Washington Post staff for confronting the caliphate. The award goes to the Reuters team for the long arm of China. This expose by a team of 8 Reuters journalists revealed how China has created a secret national broadcast network within the United States. Accepting the award are Kogwei Ching and Christina Cook.
Thank you, everyone. I'm very honored to be here tonight on behalf of the Reuters team. Good stories are always hard to write, but I think one of the reasons why journalism is sometimes difficult in China is because of the level of distrust between journalists and the people they write about. So for all of my 5 years in China, I wrote about one government agency every week, this certain government agency. But not once in those 5 years did I actually step into this agency's office. That was until the week before I left China for good. I got an invite to go over for tea. So finally, after 5 years, there I was crouching on a stool between stacks of books, sipping tea and only exchanging pleasantries, but it took me all of 5 years. This will always be a great reminder to me about the amount of work that it takes to get to where we want to be. A big thank you to my editors, my colleagues, who never once shied away from the work that was needed to put this story together. It took us 22 months, but we did it. So thank you all.
The Robert Capa Gold Medal is for exceptional courage and enterprise. It is sponsored by Time magazine. The citation goes to Jerome Delay of the Associated Press for Burundi unrest. The award goes to Bassem Kabia of Reuters for Field Hospital Damascus. He is a former IT administrator who taught himself photography by studying war photographers on the internet. He was born near Damascus, returned to live there after the war broke out. He has lost 2 brothers in that war. He told us he could not come to the dinner to accept the award in person because, and this is a quote, "we still live under siege here," but we can hear his words in this video prepared for us by Reuters.
Good night. Thank you to the Overseas Press Club of America for giving me this honor tonight and the opportunity to talk with you about Robert Capa Gold Medal Award, which I have won. It's really amazing to feature in OPC's histories amongst the most gorgeous photographers who work in very harsh circumstances to allow the world to see what's happening in dangerous area of the world, just like Robert Capa was doing before his death almost 72 years ago. Perhaps you are wondering why I didn't make it to be with you in New York. For 3 years, we have been living under siege, witnessing the horrible situation of the Syrian war. 10 years ago, I was just a photograph collector, and I always wonder, can I leave my study and my work in computer science and be a photographer instead of collecting them? It was just a thought, but then, unfortunately, the war erupted in my country, and that pushed me away from my desk to the field, holding my camera and documenting the consequences of the war in my besieged city in the Damascus countryside, Douma. Once I got the news from my editor that I had won the Robert Capa Award, I felt that I achieved part of my message to the audience of photojournalism, and I felt bad about my country, which is still suffering from scourge of war. In Syria, people consider that photograph and all the media material are not making any difference to their miserable life and their war. So to keep working here become more difficult than before. You need to be aware of rockets and war plans, and you also need to take into account the feeling of people you are covering their story from 4 years ago. Regarding to my winning story, a Syrian field hospital in Douma, it was hard to show what really happened there, but we did it. I start working on this project in very critical period, when Syrian government forces and their war planes attacked Douma on daily basis. The city was so dangerous. because I had to move under shelling from one makeshift hospital to another, and the streets around the hospital were pumped to prevent the injured to reach to any medical care center. One day I was at the emergency room section when doctors from another makeshift hospital told the medics in the emergency room, "Don't transfer any casualty to here. We are under fire, and the patient here will die because we are losing electricity." It was really a bad moment. Thank you again, and thanks to my friends and colleagues in Reuters, Jamal, Cynthia, and Alia, who I worked with step by step to achieve this project. Thank you and good night.
He taught himself photography on the internet. Think about that for a minute, right? The Olivier Ribot Award honors the best photography in magazines or in books. The citation goes to David Guttenfelder of National Geographic magazine for damming the Mekong, harnessing a river or killing it. The award goes to Stephen DuPont of Ryssdal for his book, Generation AK, The Afghanistan Wars, 1993 to 2012. As the title suggests, Stephen's covered Afghanistan for 20 years. In 2008, he survived a suicide bomber while traveling near Jalalabad. Accepting the award for him is Jacques Menage.
On behalf of my friend and colleague, Stephen DuPont, I want to thank the OPC for this recognition. Stephen asked me to collect this award because of the work we did together in Afghanistan, mostly on heroin addicts. Compared to his photographs of military violence, burning corpses, and pure terror, this represents, if you can imagine it, the soft stuff. But there's no getting away from the fact that his subject in this book, no matter what the picture, is always war. My first trip to the region took place after September 11th, about the midpoint of Stephen's work, and I knew next to nothing. Before leaving New York, I remember I picked up a 2001 guidebook to Central Asia in a bookstore to see what I could learn. Under the listing for Afghanistan, the traveler's tips gave only one: don't go. For me, it was easy to override that warning, not because I was an experienced war reporter, but rather because I knew someone who was already there. Among journalists like me who carried around dog-eared paperback copies of Ahmed Rashid's book, The Taliban, Stephen was the rare veteran, there long before it was fashionable and remaining after its brief focus in the international hurricane eye had passed. Does that matter? Absolutely. Because the Afghanistan Stephen came to know was more than a geopolitical cartoon. Rather, it was 25 million individual souls, among them Pashtuns and Tajiks and Hazaras, most of them dirt poor. Not a people, just people. Period. The photographer I saw at work reveled in Afghanistan. One day, on his 40th birthday actually, we found ourselves on the back of a flatbed truck with 3 Afghan policemen in an anti-drug unit patrolling Kabul. Me, I never felt more vulnerable. I was waiting for the big boom. But Stephen, he thought of it as a gift. A wonderland of pictures that he had to take and had to share. So on behalf of Stephen, I want to thank Ryssdal, Contact Press Images, Lizzie and Ava. Congratulations, buddy. Thanks all.
The John Faber Award honors the best photography in newspapers or news services. The citation this evening goes to Santi Palacios of the Associated Press for Coming Ashore. The award goes to Mauricio Lima, Sergei Ponomarev, Tyler Hicks, and Daniel Letter of the New York Times for their images of migrants crossing border after border after border in hope of a better life. The photographers scrambled across beaches, marched through fields, and clambered over barbed wire to get their images. Accepting the award for the group is Mauricio Lima.
Good evening, everyone. I feel extremely grateful to be here tonight, along my colleague Tyler Hicks, Sergei Ponomarev, and Daniel Etter, who unfortunately weren't able to come here. I would like to dedicate this award to every single refugee I came across last year. People oppressed by wars and social injustice, in especial to the Majid family from Syria, who accepted for 29 days a stranger with a camera as part of their family. From the darkness inside a bush before crossing the Serbian-Hungarian border at 3 in the morning, to the sunny days in the Swedish countryside where they are now living. Thank you for your perseverance and fortitude, Ahmed Majid, your wife Jamila, your lovely children, Zain, Widad, and Farida, who was born in Sweden last November. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your community spirit, Farid Majid and your wife Rojin, your beautiful children, Silva, Widad, and Nabi. Tonight, it's a very special day. And to make justice to this recognition, I would like to express my deep gratitude to the very high-level professionals of the New York Times photo department, to you, Michelle McNally, and particularly to you, David First, for your trust, for your reciprocal loyalty, tireless encouragement and belief on photography as an essential language to achieve important moments in history. And finally, by the end, I consider very important to say a few words. I'm from Brazil. And I'm pretty sure that everyone here knows what's going on in Brazil at the moment. And particularly, we are ahead of very high-level professionals on journalism here. And I would like to express my support of freedom of speech and democracy, which is exactly what's not going on in Brazil at the moment. So I'm against the coup. Thank you very much.
The Feature Photography Award this evening is sponsored by Seema Rubin of the Business of Entertainment. The citation goes to Mario Tama of Getty Images for Brazil's afflictive prison system. The winner is Daniel Berahulak of the New York Times for High in the Himalayas, a search after the Nepal quake yields grim results. After other photographers had documented the flattened temples in Kathmandu and moved on, Berahulak stayed behind, capturing the grief of people who did not expect help to come. Daniel was not able to get a US visa to come here to join us this evening. He sent us this video this morning.
Good evening, everybody. It's an honor to be recognized by my peers and by the Overseas Press Club. And for this, I'm extremely grateful. However, I admit, it feels strange to be receiving an award for covering the aftermath of an earthquake. The first anniversary has only just passed 3 days ago, and people are still mourning their loved ones, and thousands are not only rebuilding their homes, but their entire lives. As a photographer, I'm constantly wrestling with doubts in the back of my mind about whether our pictures do enough. I struggle with what can seem like irreconcilable questions and the guilt of not knowing what immediate impact our images have. I suppose the power of the image is to document, to inform. However, it's not just a historical record, it is the power of empathy. An image gives a stranger the capacity to feel another person's pain and to connect with them wherever they may be. It's an honor and a privilege to tell the stories of these people, to make others stop and pay attention, even if it is for just a moment. For this story, I photographed a country in pain. I watched a mother mourning the death of a 3-year-old daughter, villages pancaked by the force of the earthquake, inaccessible and cut off to the world, and a man who'd come to the barbershop for a trim, still sitting in a chair, lifeless, surrounded by rubble. And while tonight that honor belongs to me, I would like to dedicate this award to the people of Nepal, whose resilience and quiet dignity in the face of disaster was and is an inspiration. Thank you.
The Lowell Thomas Award is for Best Radio or Audio News. The winner is Molly Webster and her team from WNYC Radio Lab. They took a story about a gay Israeli couple on a quest to contract for a surrogate baby and turned it into a complex and surprising international tale of intolerance, economics, and ultimately love.
So this was a story that when we first started doing it seemed pretty straightforward. It was about a gay male couple in Israel that really wanted a baby that was genetically theirs. And so the end result, because of laws in Israel, was that they decided that they would go to Nepal to get that baby through a surrogate mother, 2 actually. And the original thought was that this is obviously an interesting story. It has to do with like, what does it mean to be a parent and new families and LGBTQ rights. But what happened when we started reporting this story, we were having a normal conversation with these guys. They were kind of bringing us up to speed on what had happened. And at one moment in the story, they said that they found themselves outside the Israeli embassy with their 3 newborns, and they were in the company of 21 other babies. And we sort of had this moment where I heard this number, like 24 babies were waiting outside the Israeli embassy to get home to somewhere that wasn't in Nepal. And it was a moment when the entire story changed for us. And we realized that there was sort of this, like I said it in the story, it felt like there was this pipeline of babies going from Southeast Asia to basically the Western world. And what I became very interested in that moment was less about the couples who are on like a search to figure out how to have a family. And I feel deeply for that, but also about these women who seem to be supplying the rest of the world with babies. And so this story was a big work of love, but it was amazing to finally, what I realized was that these women, you never actually hear their own voices. And so it was an amazing honor to be able to find women on the ground in India and Nepal and have them trust us to record their voices and use them in a way that actually brings them to the Western world and lets us kind of think about this situation that's happening. So I'm indebted to WNYC for giving me the time and to the Overseas Press Club for honoring us. Thank you.
Just for the record, the guy with the microphone and the dinosaur was Jada Boomrod of Radio Lab. Robert Krulwich, the other guy on top of the Empire State Building, just in case the pictures were confusing. Okay. The David Kaplan Award for Best TV or Video News Spots is sponsored by ABC News. The citation goes to the CBS team of Charlie DeGatta, Heather Abbott, Aaron Lyle, and Lynn Edwards for Desperate Journey, Europe's Migrant Crisis. The winner isn't actually a traditional broadcaster, but a newspaper. A team of journalists at the New York Times used video to convey the terror and confusion and the pain of the Paris terrorist attacks by simply allowing eyewitnesses and victims to tell their stories all in their own words. Accepting the award for the team are Adam Ellick and Kyundo.
Thank you. It's quite uplifting to be here with Jason, who graciously showed me around Tehran a few years ago, and also to have David Rode here in the room, who lit a candle in the same spot a few years ago after he was freed. It's a bit odd, in fact, for the Times to be winning an award for TV coverage, because we set out not to make TV. Our response to the Paris attacks was to reimagine video breaking news, and the result was more than 40 videos, from clips to live streams to exclusive victim profiles. We wanted the victims to tell their own story, so we deliberately produced everything without voiceover and without dubbing. At the time, a viewer named Amy Cameron emailed us and said that you allow the people to speak for themselves in their own language is a wise choice. It allows us to hear the nuance of emotion in people's voices. Please keep connecting us to the people of France by making and showing such videos at this crucial time. This award belongs to a team, a large team of more than 10 people. But up here tonight are some key contributors, a group of young reporters who worked with an ambition, an urgency, and a sensitivity that made this possible. Quinn Doe engineered a stream of more than 70 video clips and live streams that weekend. Deborah Acosta produced social media reporting that led to horrific and exclusive survivor accounts. Leslie Davis put down a VR kit in South America and flew instantly into Paris for spot news coverage. And Yusur Al-Hilu and Ben Laffin edited responsibly and artfully and created day 1, 2, 3, and 4 stories, all in the first day and a half. I'd like to thank Dean Baquet and Steve Duenas for their support. And most of all, we would like to thank the young people in France, the kids, the parents, the survivors, and the families of victims who trusted us in those days to enter their shattered lives and who shared their stories with us even before those stories were over. Thank you.
The Edward R. Murrow Award, sponsored by CBS, is for Best Television or Video Documentary. The citation goes to David Scott and Chapman Downs of HBO's Real Sports with Brian Gumbel for The Killing Fields of the Plight of the African Elephant. And the winner, that's the corner right over there. That's the HBO corner. The winner is the Frontline team of Jamie Duran, or Doran, I apologize, Najibullah Qurashi and Rainey Aronson. Their documentary, ISIS in Afghanistan, tracked the correspondent to a remote Afghan village to see how ISIS is brutally displacing the Taliban. Qurashi's courageous reporting gives a glimpse of ISIS education, tutorials in beheading and grenade tossing. Congratulations.
I should look at the clock. I would like to thank OPC and their team for bringing together tonight. It's an incredible honor, and all the winners are amazing. Secondly, I would like to thank my colleagues at Kaloa Films, like Tracy, who is hard work and organization's skills make these stories possible. But of course, there's a man I met 15 years ago in northern Afghanistan, Jamie Doran, is just beside me. We have been made lots of films through those years in the last 15 years. Over those years, we have seen my country go from the great hope in the early days to great despair today. Please don't doubt about it. My country is dying. As you have seen from our film, the next generation is in incredible danger. Education these days becoming how to use weapons, how to behave, and how to blow yourself up. It might not direct affect you today, but don't ignore it. Could be coming your way one day. This award means so much to us, and we will never stop investigating these terrible things in the world. To you all, when you sit down on a Monday to decide which stories you will cover, please don't forget Afghanistan. Thank you so much for this award.
Just to say one thing, apart from the immense bravery of my buddy here of 15 years now, the one thing that cannot go unmentioned is the incredible support and skills of the frontline team, these days headed by Rainey Aronson, who is just immense. There's Andrew Metz, Dan Edge, who was there for the edit, but it's all because of the guy you honored earlier. It's David Fanning.
You know what's amazing about being in this room, and it just hit me now, I'm in a room with people who say, yeah, I met him in northern Afghanistan 15 years ago, like he's talking about the Starbucks on 53rd. You know, I'm sorry, anyway. The Ed Cunningham Magazine Award is sponsored by Ford Motor Corporation. The citation goes to Mathieu Akins of Harper's Magazine for Gangs of Karachi. The winner is Tristan McDonnell of Foreign Policy for Close Your Eyes and Pretend to Be Dead. McConnell tracked down survivors, first responders, and police to deliver a retelling of the Westgate Mall massacre in Nairobi in September of 2013 that killed at least 67 people. Tristan came in from Nairobi to accept this award in person.
It's a tremendous honor to receive this award today. Terrorist attacks against civilian targets have become increasingly, appallingly common. We've seen them in Tunisia, France, the US, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Ivory Coast in just the last year. As foreign correspondents, we're used to packing our bags and heading to whichever conflict or crisis we've persuaded our editors to take an interest in, but it's less common to have the story come crashing into our daily lives. I was lighting up a lunchtime barbecue when I got the first phone calls about shooting at the Westgate Mall, and soon afterwards I went down there. It was a beautiful, warm, clear Saturday afternoon in Nairobi. I could hear gunfire from inside the mall and see hundreds of terrified shoppers running out past the bullet-hole cars parked on the street. When it was all over, 3 days later, at least 67 people were dead. At the time, all of us as reporters snatched at scraps of information to file our reports. We did our best with what we had, only it turned out that what we thought was happening was in fundamental ways wrong. But the story ended and everyone moved on to the next crisis. So this was my effort to atone for that, to set the record straight and tell both a factual and an emotional truth about it. I wanted to capture the big picture and the small specific moments, the silent prayers of mothers, Faith and Catherine trapped with their children, the selfless heroism of Michael, Noura, and Abdul risking their lives for strangers, Arnold listening to Justin Timberlake on repeat as he lay bleeding on the floor of a burger restaurant, Simon's dawning horror as he realizes the scale of the attack that's left him hiding and wounded beneath a car. I wanted to transport readers inside the mall and inside the minds of the people, ordinary people just like them, to inspire the empathy that's required if foreign reporting is to do what it must, which is to make us recognize our common humanity, even if we look different or live differently. I'd like to thank Rebecca Frankel and Ty McCormick at Foreign Policy for embracing this story when I brought it to them. But my greatest gratitude is to those without whom none of us here would achieve anything in our professional lives. And that's the many people who agreed to talk to me, often at great length and with an incredible raw openness, and were willing to share their experiences and their stories. Thank you.
The Thomas Nast Cartoon Award is sponsored by JetBlue. It is awarded to Patrick Chapati of the International New York Times. Patrick, who won this very same award 4 years ago, flew here from Paris. He has also a short presentation.
Yeah, I hope you don't mind a cartoonist with a French accent quoting Shakespeare. But we live in a world full of sound and fury. Yeah, that's the full quote. Yeah, we're celebrating 400 years of Shakespeare. These words are timeless, but the world has changed a little bit. So 2015 was a year full of danger and anger. What is the main threat that we are facing today? Well, it depends of the point of view, it depends of the perspective. Yeah, this is a cartoon I did for the climate conference. And it's true, it was hard to get people's attention about rising sea levels and melting ice in this world of terror. Oh, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, this is a nice cartoon, right? But there's something wrong. Polar bears and penguins, right? Polar bears are in the North Pole and penguins, you got it right. But look closely. There's this little penguin telling the big guy, what the heck are you doing here? So we live in a world of danger. There's the Zika virus. Some people think that danger comes from the East. Where's the East? Over there. From Russia, Vladimir Putin. Russia's new assertive stance. Now, if you look to the West, there is some reason to be scared. Trump had a foreign policy speech yesterday. Well, his vision of the world is still very sketchy. This is the sketch. Meanwhile, in Europe, we have a little migrant crisis. So yes, we live in a world of danger and anger. There's a lot of anger against the elites, the top 1%, perceived as taking advantage of globalization. And it's true that there are more and more complex ways to hide your money, but after the Panama Papers, what to do, where to go? It's become hard to hide your money, especially for some of us, not all of us. So there is nowhere to hide. Not even Apple's iPhone is immune to scrutiny. The FBI cracked it open. And then 2015 is the year when war entered our cities. On an unusually mild November afternoon in Paris, when people were enjoying terraces. And I tried to capture the very essence of what was attacked that day. And I thought of this photo of Robert Doisneau. And what happened in Paris at that time was a sinister echo of the other horror that happened in the same city a few months ago. A line was crossed in blood, innocence was lost, and friends and colleagues were killed. I'm thinking about Tinius, Cabu, and many others. So we live now in a world where we are being told that one thing you draw or you write anywhere can be seen on the other side of the planet, on the streets of Peshawar, or Kabul, or wherever. This is the guarantee of big misunderstandings. We live in an open world with closed minds. I don't think we're going to come up with a global universal sense of humor, Yet every society needs it more than ever. We need humor to process the horror and atrocities of the world. Thank you very much.
The Morton Frank Award for Best International Business Reporting in Magazines and sponsored by Mark Lemke. The citation goes to Nizar Manek and Jeremy Hodge of Africa Confidential for opening the black box of Egypt's slush funds. The winner is Christina Larson of Foreign Policy. In her story, The Zhao Method, Christina chronicles the rise of 23-year-old Zhao Bowen, who abandoned China's state-run scientific research institutions to join the country's emerging entrepreneurial class. Christina.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for your attention. After our last distinguished winner, I feel like I should have some more jokes for you. Fortunately, my talk is a little bit straight. I wanted to first thank the editors at Foreign Policy who helped me in shaping this piece, especially Amanda Silverman and Mindy K. Brinker, and also to thank Ben Pauker, Becky Frankel, and Sayward Darby, who are all here tonight. I also wanted to thank past editors at different publications who shaped my thinking and style of analysis. As any magazine writer or journalist working in any medium probably knows, writing or photo editing or going about whatever your work is sometimes feels like an ongoing conversation with every good editor you've ever had. And so I wanted to acknowledge Paul Glastris, Charlie Peters, Rich Stone, Susan Glasser, and many others I've had the privilege to work with. I first reported in China on a fellowship in 2009 and first wrote for Foreign Policy, I first reported for China on a fellowship in 2007 and first wrote for Foreign Policy in 2009. At that time, the big China story felt like one of unstoppable growth. China was building a new power plant every week and accounted for fully half the world's concrete production. It felt like an unstoppable juggernaut. Now, as the Chinese economy slows, as factories and coal mines and steel plants begin to close, it's clear that the old export and infrastructure-led model of growth must give way to something else. And so in reporting on scientists, technology companies, and the startup ambitions in China today, I have the great privilege of glimpsing what the country might become. The profile I worked on for Foreign Policy magazine followed the story of one young maverick scientist who left the traditional Chinese Academy of Sciences to found his own gut microbe mapping startup in Beijing, raising millions of dollars from private investors and attempting to live out a new kind of Chinese dream. We don't know yet whether or not he'll be fully successful, but it is clear by the number of startups and the money flowing into the startup space in Beijing that there are many hundreds, probably thousands, who are attempting to follow a similar path. And it'll be interesting to see what that means for China and for the relationship between the US and China. And then finally, on a closing note, I wanted to give a shout out and thank all of the freelance writers, photographers, and other journalists who today play a vital, if often underappreciated role in modern foreign correspondence, sometimes at great physical peril and often at their own financial peril. For the past several years, I've been part of that tribe, other tough-minded independent journalists who somehow just buckle down and make extraordinary things happen, finding ways to tell important and difficult stories that the world otherwise wouldn't hear. Thank you.
We've already presented the Malcolm Forbes Award, as I said at the beginning, to the AP Seafood from Slaves team. The citation in this one is worth a mention. Wei Linling of the Wall Street Journal for A Changing China. A round of applause there, please. The Cornelius Ryan Book Award is sponsored by the Friends of Richard Thalkel. The citation goes to Blaine Hardin for The Great Leader and the Fighter Pilot, published by Viking Penguin Random House. The winner is Tom Burgess for The Looting Machine, published by Public Affairs. Tom, is it? And there's the FT. Tom's an investigations correspondent for the FT. He's based in London. The book, which is his first, describes how resource-rich African countries have been looted by their political leaders working hand in hand with international corporations. Tom?
Thanks very much indeed. In Nigeria, where I used to live, they have one of the biggest oil industries, pumping out crude to fill tanks all over the world. They have enormous quantities of natural gas, but they have a pitiful amount of electricity themselves. They have about enough electricity to power one toaster for every 44 people. And for a long time, the company that was theoretically in charge of providing electricity to Nigerians was called the National Electric Power Authority, or NEPA, N-E-P-A, but universally known as Never Expect Power Anytime. And a few years ago, as part of a big reform idea, they got rid of NEPA and they introduced the Power Holding Company of Nigeria, or PHCN. And pretty quickly that became known as Please Have Candles Nearby, or my favorite, Problem Has Changed Name. And in my years covering Africa, I tried to find the name for that problem, that curse, really, which is why it is that such vast natural wealth in places like Nigeria and Zimbabwe and Congo and Angola and a swathe of other African countries, why it is that those places with that wealth exist with such corruption and violence and repression and poverty. And the name I ultimately came up with was the looting machine. And it's a machine that, yes, has engines in those African countries, but has crucial cogs here in Manhattan, in Wall Street, in the City of London, on Queensway in Hong Kong. And a lot of very brave people took some great personal risks over many years to help me name the names of the victims of that looting machine, and there are many, but also of the beneficiaries. And it's absolutely heartening. And I'm delighted that the OPC has decided that those stories that those brave people told are important and that we should listen to them. If I may quickly, I must just thank a few of the people who helped to put that book together over many, many years. Clive Priddle, who's here, and everyone at Public Affairs, Martin Redfern, everyone at HarperCollins, Sophie Lambert, everybody at Conwell and Walsh, my remarkable colleagues at the Financial Times for letting me roam around Africa, to my extraordinary wife, Cam, who's over there, and last but not least, to our little Delilah. This is for her.
The Madeleine Dane Ross Award is sponsored by OPC member Linda Fasulo for the best international reporting in print or online, showing a concern for the human condition. The winners are Patrick McDonald, Christopher Goffard, Laura Kane, Kate Linthicum, and Henry Chu from Los Angeles Times for Fleeing Syria. The Times dispatched reporters to 7 countries to report and write the narratives that help readers understand the struggles of Syrians looking for safe refuge. Please. Somebody's got to speak.
I'll do the talking.
We nominate this.
This award is a great honor, and it is a great honor to have worked on a team that went so far to tell these stories of Syrian refugees. We went from the shores of Greece to the Jordanian desert to the streets of Sao Paulo, and it's an honor also to be in a room among so many people so many unbelievably courageous people who every day uphold the finest traditions of our profession. During a political season in which refugees are so often demonized and mischaracterized, their humanity lost in the sound bites of demagogues and the abstractions of statistics, I think this work is more relevant than ever. And one thing we learned, one thing we were reminded of during our work last year is that the Syrian crisis is not just about 11 million displaced people, but about countless individual stories. Thank you.
The The David A. Endelman and Pamela Title Award, sponsored by David and Pamela, is for Best International Reporting in the Broadcast Media, showing a concern for the human condition. The citation goes to Maureen Olivesi of PRI The World for Trauma and the Syrian War. The winners are Evan Williams, Edward Watts, and Rainey Aronson of Frontline. That's 2, by the way, for escaping ISIS. The show exposes the terror group's brutality against women and children and offers an exclusive inside look at a secret underground cell working to free them.
First of all, thank you very much to the OPC and to the judges. This is a tremendous honor for us all involved. Edward Watts, the lead director on this piece, sadly couldn't make it tonight and passes on his sincere regrets. He very much tried to be here, but in fact, the fact that we were in Iraq together meant that he wasn't able to come here on the visa that he had. The irony I tried to enforce on the border guards, but the joke didn't go down too well. Anyway, very importantly, I'd like to say thank you very much, first of all, to the Frontline team, Rainey Aronson, Andrew Metz. Without them, this film wouldn't have been made. Originally commissioned by Channel 4 in Britain through Siobhan Sinnerton, but the fact that Frontline came in with the tremendous skill they have to craft these films is just amazing. And there's continued support for this sort of film is so important in public broadcasting across the world, we believe. A couple of small things about the evolution of this film. It started off as an attempt to try and reveal what was going on inside the Islamic State in Syria. I had a small role, which I'll get to in a second, but Edward was sent in to basically film with people who were trying to get Yazidi women who had been kidnapped by the Islamic State and were being sold as sex slaves. He found an amazing network of people trying to get them out from within the Islamic State, and he made that his film, and he did a tremendous job at great personal risk to get that film and those characters. My role was to try and get material out from a very brave group of young Syrians who were secretly filming life inside Raqqa. They're called Raqqa is Being Slaughtered Silently. I worked with them to give them the equipment and training to get that material out, and we put the two films together, and that's what became the final piece. Several of their members have been assassinated by the Islamic State in the course of their work, and I'd just like to say that I think this award is really for them and for the people involved in trying to battle the Islamic State. Finally, the film showed great terror, the terror of being under something like the Islamic State, but it also showed hope and resilience. And it was the hope and resilience of the people who resisted extremism and violence in that situation. And that's what this film is really about. And that's the award is really for them. Thank you very much.
The Joe and Lori Dine Award is for Best International Reporting in any medium dealing with human rights. It is sponsored by Philip Dine. It goes to David Rode and Charles Levinson of Reuters for a provocative series about the Guantanamo prison. Rode's reporting broke new ground about the prevalence of torture in Guantanamo Bay and the CIA's sexual abuse of prisoners.
Thank you all so much for this. Charles and I were just whispering to each other about how much this means to both of us, how much it means to Reuters. It's just a thrill and an honor for both of us. But I'll be honest, this story sort of started out, frankly, as a real loser. What could you possibly write new about Guantanamo Bay 14 years after that facility had been opened? There was a sort of solidified narrative out there that, the hardworking Obama administration had done everything it could to close Guantanamo, it cracked down on CIA torture, and there was nothing more to report. To our amazement, editors at Reuters, Steve Adler, Mike Williams, Alex Friedman, and most of all, John Blanton, believed in Charles and I. They believed that there were new stories to be told. And together, we were able to discover that the sexual abuse and the sexual misconduct in CIA black sites went beyond what was revealed in the Senate torture report. We uncovered that the Obama administration's effort to reform Guantanamo Bay's military commissions have been an absolute failure. and the commissions, the trials going on down there were a farce. And most importantly, in our last story, we found out that the problem wasn't only Republicans in Congress who were being blamed for the slow emptying of Guantanamo by the Obama administration. Instead, we found systematic delays through different bureaucratic tactics by the Pentagon. 4 Afghan detainees spent 4 additional years in Guantanamo after being cleared to release due to Pentagon slow rolling. 6 prisoners that should have been transferred to Uruguay, 5 to Kazakhstan, 1 to Mauritania, and 1 to Britain. Their departures after being cleared for release were delayed for months and years. And finally, we found out that a hunger striker who had refused to eat for 7 years, who weighed 74 pounds, had his departure from Guantanamo delayed for more than 6 months by Pentagon officials who refused to release his medical records to countries that wanted to take him. I thank my editors, again, our editors, for believing in us and believing in the story. I thank Charles's partner, Melissa, my wife, Kristen, who's here, my father, Harvey, my stepmother, Andrea. Again, we couldn't have done this without the support of these editors and these family members. And most of all, this should be a joint award. You know, Charles and I, to be honest, are late coming to this incredible coverage that's been going on for more than a decade of Guantanamo. Carol Rosenberg of the Miami Herald's done amazing work. Charles Savage of the New York Times, Adam Goldman and Missy Ryan of the Washington Post, Spencer Ackerman of The Guardian, many reporters for the Wall Street Journal. Every news organization here has been part of this effort. So I accept this on behalf of Charles and Reuters, but all the amazing journalists that won't let the world forget Guantanamo. I spoke to 2 sources today, and the delays continue in terms of emptying Guantanamos. The problem continues tonight as we stand here. Thank you so much for this honor.
The Whitman-Basso Environment Award is sponsored by Citi. The citation goes to Ian James, Steve Elfers, and Steve Riley of the Desert Sun, USA Today, for Pumped Dry, the Global Crisis of Vanishing Groundwater. The winner is a team from the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, the Huffington Post, and other media partners. More than 80 journalists from more than 20 countries worked for more than a year documenting tragedies that occurred as projects funded by the World Bank failed to abide by that institution's rules. Accepting the award is Mike Hudson of the International Consortium for Investigative Journalists.
Hi, I'm Mike Hudson. There are other important people here. Sasha Shavkin, who was came up with the idea for the story and was a lead reporter, and Charlie Sennett, who's the editor-in-chief of the Ground Truth Project, which is one of our key partners on the project. So I just want to start with a scene. Gladys Cheknois was weeding potatoes in her garden the day the men came to burn down her house. After her mother-in-law told her that rangers from the Kenya Forest Service were on their way, she strapped her 1-year-old son on her back and hurried to her thatched roof home. She grabbed 2 tins of corn, blankets, plates, cooking pans, and hid in a thicket. She watched as the rangers set her house on fire. After they were gone, she came out to the thicket to see what was left. And she said, what used to be my house was now ashes. Some stories are too important to ignore, but sometimes they get ignored because they're too complex, too global, and too hard to get to. When Sasha proposed an investigation of the human and environmental toll of big projects bankrolled by the World Bank, we knew we were uniquely situated to do that because of ICIJ's commitment to big collaborations that work with journalists on the ground around the world. Some folks, you may have heard something about the Panama Papers project that we've been rolling out recently. That project had That project had 370 journalists from more than 100 news organizations. This is a small project. We had 80 journalists from 25 news organizations. And the thing that's really amazing about our partners, like the Ground Truth Project, like the Huffington Post, like El País, Fusion, WDR and NDR in Germany, and many others, is it's journalists who display something that journalists aren't often known for, a couple things, and that's teamwork and patience. The idea of sharing information with people that you normally think of your competitors, and being willing to wait months, and in this case, almost a year before we publish is just an extraordinary thing. We reported on the ground in 14 countries. I was fortunate enough to go to Kosovo, which is one of the few countries in the world where they actually welcome Americans and American journalists. Ben Hallman from the Huffington Post went to Peru, where he was so, to report on a gold mine way up in the Andean mountains. He was so paranoid about having his notebook taken from him that he would shoot every page of his notebook with his iPhone and email it to himself so he wouldn't lose his notes. Sasha went into some pretty dangerous situations in Honduras and Ethiopia and South Sudan. I know when Sasha went to a military camp in a violence-stained region of Honduras, an Army colonel informed him that he already knew Sasha's itinerary for the day, where he was going, and who he planned to interview. And when Sasha asked him, how he acquired this information, he just said simply, "I am a military man." In Kenya's Western Highlands, rifle-toting officers from the Kenya Forest Service confronted Anthony Langat and Jacob Kushner, who were reporters with the Ground Truth Project, as they tried to interview Gladys Chepmwa and other indigenous members of the indigenous tribe, the Singwar, who claimed that a forest conservation program bankrolled by the World Bank was actually fueling mass evictions and burning of their homes. Anthony and Jacob were sort of detained essentially for about an hour, and they couldn't get out of the rangers whether or not they were actually being arrested or they were just talking. At one point, they asked the rangers if they knew, if they were the ones who'd set the fire to the Singwar's homes the day before, and one of the rangers responded, "How do you know that they're not burning their own houses?" So, this story, I think this award is a tribute to the reporters around the world in very difficult situations do the reporting, but I think it's also a tribute to people like Gladys Chepmwa who are willing to speak out when things are wrong and really put themselves on the line. And
thank you. I'll keep this very quick. I want to thank Overseas Press Club and Mike, who has had a career in investigative journalism, helping people who are in need and who have been abused by powerful institutions, which is all that I aspire to achieve. And finally, I know this is cheesy, but to all the people who have spoken to us in the course of this investigation, development isn't easy, and it isn't even fair all of the time, but it doesn't have to be vicious and brutal and violent. And to the people who are victims of cases where that was the reality, it took a lot of courage for them to open up to our team, and that is very, very meaningful to us and to the changes in the World Bank's policy that their courage has brought about. Thanks.
I'll be even faster. I just want to thank Mike Hudson. He's an amazing editor, and ICIJ is an amazing partner. They are doing amazing collaborative work on investigative journalism, and you haven't even begun to hear from them yet. So here's to ICIJ.
The Robert Spears Benjamin Award is sponsored by Dee Dee Hunter in honor of her father, Lester Zifrin. For reporting in Latin America, it goes to Eduardo Castillo, Christopher Sherman, and Dario Lopez Mills of the Associated Press. The team used the notorious case of abduction of 42 students in Iguala, Mexico, which you might remember as the premise for a more ambitious story about really the despair of a society in which 26,000 people have gone missing. Gentlemen, please.
evening, and thank you very much to the OPC for this recognition. Rosa Segura Giral's daughter, Berenice, was forced into a car by armed men the day her graduation party was to be held. The party ended in heartache as family and friends returned home without being able to celebrate Berenice's milestone. Reina Marcela Barragan's husband, Pedro, owned a used car lot. He was abducted and forced to turn over all the cars in his lot to his kidnappers in exchange for a safe return. After her son Fabian gave them the cars, he himself was taken by the kidnappers. Reina's husband and son never came home. Like these stories, hundreds of families were torn apart when one or more of their loved ones were taken away, never to be seen again. Their stories would have remained in obscurity had it not been because of the disappearance of these 43 students. And the international attention brought upon the city of Iguala over the case. A year ago, we met with the relatives of the other disappeared and explained what our project was, to document and tell the story of each and every one of the missing relatives in their group. Through that mosaic, tried to show the magnitude of the missing in just one town of Mexico. We felt that Iguala was a microcosm of what was happening all over Mexico. Aiming to remain true to our project, the idea of an interactive evolved and became essential to this story. We thank you very much for this award. We truly hope that this will keep the story alive so that no one forgets the fact that so many people in Mexico are missing, that authorities in Mexico seem to care so little about the missing. When we began this project, the official count of disappeared stood at 25,592. Today, more than 3,000 people have been added to that count. As for our group, the other disappeared, we sincerely thank them for sharing their stories, for overcoming their fears and opening their hearts to show the feeling of emptiness and profound grief a missing loved one leaves, especially if you know that he or she was taken violently. For them, as well as for the parents of the 43 students, truth, justice, and closure has yet to come. Lastly, I would like to thank the Associated Press for having the patience and guiding us throughout this project and for believing in this project from the very beginning. Thank you very much.
The award for Best Multimedia News Presentation is sponsored by Google. The citation goes to Ken Dornstein, Brian Funick, and was that Google or what? You can never tell. The citation goes to Ken Dornstein, Brian Funk, and Michelle Misner of Frontline for My Brother's Bomber, Inheritance, the Libya Dossier, A Brother's Quest. The winners are Eleanor Bell Fox Will, Fitzgibbons, and Chris Zubak Skis of the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and the Pulitzer Center. This ambitious project investigated Australia's unchecked footprint in the African mining industry to expose the massacres, torture, incarceration, displacement, and deaths ignored by the world for more than a decade. Please.
Thank you very much, and g'day. First of all, thank you to the Overseas Press Club for allowing a Kiwi and an Australian to grace this stage who work in Washington, D.C., are receiving a prize in New York City, and who reported in Mali, Malawi, South Africa, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Thank you also to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, which, yes, is more than Panama Papers, our parent organization, the Center for Public Integrity, and to the Pulitzer Center for Crisis Reporting, without whom we couldn't have traveled to these far-flung locales. Thank you also to those very brave workers and community members from Cape Town to Cairo who spoke to us, who told us that there is a world relating to Australia that is more than Kylie Minogue and Steve Irwin. And I include someone like Mr. Cadwell Sichinga, who you saw on the screen there, who was burnt in an unsafe chemical accident in 2009 and who has only ever received $2,000 of compensation. He sent me a text message on April 14th, all in capital letters, because he likes that, saying, "Good evening, sir. It's me, Sichinga. Situation is getting worse. Nowhere to get assistance of medicine, always in bed, crying pains. Please, please help. To show film, you take me any well, wisher to help. It shows this is a situation that's ongoing and that people who have suffered still haven't got the attention they deserve, but they believe in the work, especially the beautiful visual work that people like Eleanor Bell Fox do. Thank you very much.
The Best Investigative Reporting Award is sponsored by Michael Serrell. The citation goes to Ken Dornstein, Brian Funk, and Rainey Aronson of Frontline for My Brother's Bomber. The winners are Erica Solomon, Sam Jones, Ahmad Midi, and Guy Chazan of the Financial Times for ISIS, Inc. Their investigation of the extremist group's oil trading and financial operations illuminates where ISIS gets its revenues and how it exploits and extorts just about everybody in the territory that it controls. Please.
Thank you so much to the OPC for recognizing our efforts on this project. I'm so humbled to be among these amazing winners tonight. And I'm honored to be here on behalf of my colleagues, Sam, Ahmed, Robin, and Guy, who were just amazing colleagues to work with and team players. I'd like to take a moment, it would seem remiss not to mention, as we cover these countries, the terrible bombings that have happened in Aleppo in the past 24 hours, and how sorry I am to see the continued suffering of the people that I write about every day. Like many good stories that I've heard about today, and as well with our own, some of the best finds emerge almost accidentally, a reminder that sometimes people in the most dramatic situations get so caught up in them they don't realize how incredible they are. And it was really only after several interviews that we did with oil truckers who were bringing in and out ISIS oil that one trucker casually mentioned he waited in a months-long queue, camped out with food, to get oil 1 month. And that really put into sharp focus for us the question about how effectively the coalition's campaign to target ISIS resources really was. This series was a painstaking process, and so I want to give a heartfelt thanks to the FT and our incredible editors, most especially Rula Khalaf and Alec Russell, who believed enough in our reporting to give us months to get it done. I believe that reporting this series was not just about numbers or confirming the fear that is so easy to feel when we write about jihadi groups. For me, it was really about the insight we got into the lives of very normal people who get caught up in chaos. A young man so desperate to feed his family that he would take a job at an ISIS-run gas plant, or a courageous aid worker who keeps fueling his drills with ISIS oil so he can pull victims out of bombing wreckage. And even the war-hardened smuggler, so divorced from a sense of purpose that he would sell guns to the same jihadi force fighting his relatives and friends. Beyond the calculations and numbers our stories offer, I hope we were able to show how so many people are not simply criminals or victims. They are just the real human face of war, people with impossible choices. Thank you.
The final award of the evening is for Best Commentary. It is sponsored by Robert Serio of Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher. The citation goes to Bobby Gosha Quartz for what the Iran nuclear deal means for the Middle East. The winner is Mark Lilla for his articles in the New York Review of Books about France in the year after the terrorist attack on Charlie Hebdo.
It's unusual being here since I'm not a full-time journalist. I was asked recently how I earn a living, and I said that I'm a journalist at Columbia University and a professor at the New York Review of Books. Last year I had a sabbatical and I went to Paris to work on a book, along with my wife, the artist Diana Cooper, who's here tonight, and whose photos you may at some point see. I chose Paris for the reasons people choose Paris. I wanted to go to a place where, a beautiful place where the food is good, the people are reliably rude, and an eternal city where nothing important ever really happens. I only got half of that right. Instead, I found myself swept up in a collective psychodrama that began on a Wednesday when journalists at Charlie Hebdo were gunned down, Went on to a Thursday when a police officer outside of a Jewish school south of Paris was shot down. Then to a Friday when customers at a kosher supermarket to the east of Paris were shot down. And then a Sunday when millions of people milled about on the streets of Paris, around France, and around the world in memory of those who had been killed. I've spent a lot of time in France in my life, lived there for years on and off, and I thought I knew the country. But the terrorist attacks of 2015, between the time of the Charlie Hebdo attacks and the Bataclan attacks of November, revealed hidden dark rooms in the national psyche that I didn't know existed. It's not pleasant to watch someone you love go through a trauma, but it's revealing both about them and about yourself. I discovered a country that for a whole host of reasons, having to do with globalization, European unification, immigration, religious fanaticism, no longer knows what it is or what it wants. To understand that story, it's important to understand French history, French intellectual life, the arts, literature, and even philosophy. So I sat down to write what I hoped would be not only a story about France, but a story about our time. I couldn't have done it, though, without the patience and commitment of the New York Review of Books, and particularly of its publisher, Ray Hederman, who's here tonight, and its editor, Robert Silvers, who's on a plane to Europe as we speak. This remarkable publication, which is now 50 years old, it's been an extraordinary adventure in journalism and intellectual life in American letters, has made a place for all this time for thoughtful reporting, essays, and reviews that wouldn't quite fit into other publications or news media. We hear a lot of lip service to long-form journalism today, but it's really been the New York Review of Books that has remained the institution where one turns for thinking and writing, where the authors are taking a step back from the day-to-day news to think about how the events of our time fit into a larger picture. I'm grateful to Ray and to Bob and to my sometime editors who are here tonight, Michael Shea and Hugh Eakin, for making room for me. And I'd like to share this award from them, remarking, though, that I will be keeping the money and I will especially be keeping the computer. Thank you very much.
And that is, as they say, the evening. That is the formal part of the program. Please join us at the Meet the Winners reception, sponsored by Reuters in the lobby as you exit the dining room. Citation winners, if you come on up here and do the class picture, that'd be lovely too. Thank you all for your time. Congratulations to the winners, all of them.